Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today's Feb 17, 2025. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Please subscribe. Also want to thank David Moss for introducing us to today's guest, Irene Kurka. Why don't you pronounce it so people can hear the correct pronunciation?
Well, thank you for welcoming me here into your show. And I say Irene Kurka. And it's a wonderful name because Irene is Greek, which means the goddess of peace. And the last name is a Czech name.
How cool is that? My last name is Czech too, for violet or purple. So we got
Yeah.
we have a connection. Where are you calling from?
I'm in Düsseldorf, Germany right now.
The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
To be alive.
Yes. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
I think it's hard to tell. Some things I would ever read or hear or see, and then it inspires me to do something on my own. And some things maybe they come from wherever. I could not even name it.
You can't even name it. That's beautiful. I rarely get that answer, and it's so accurate. So, just on reading for a second, did you become a reader? One, because your parents told you to, two, they did it as an example, or three, on your own?
Well, I actually learned reading at school, and at first it was very hard for me. But I was, there's a funny word in German. It's called Leseratte. It means the rat of reading. And once I could read, I was reading like one book a day. I would go to the library and I would pick up 7 books and I would read them. And next week I would go again. So I love reading.
Now, I missed the word, the rap, RAP or RAT of reading.
Yeah, it's rat. R-A-T, like the mouse, but the other mouse. And it's called the rat of reading. Leseratte.
How do you spell that? L what?
Leserettee.
RES as in Sam? E?
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. I learned a new word, German word. Thank you so much. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Wow. That's interesting. I think in some way maybe they want to keep themselves busy and they're curious. They want to understand the world and they try to do it through knowledge. And I think you get to a certain point, but I'm not sure if you get to the real thing with knowledge.
Yes. Do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
Hmm. Maybe innate, but I don't know.
Yeah. Saying I don't know is totally welcome. I can't answer that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. This is good. You really get it. And I'm glad you're smiling because we're here to have fun.
Okay.
Do thoughts create emotions?
Yes, I
Yeah.
think so. But you can also have emotions and then develop funny stories around it, and then you're tracked in a loop and you don't get out in the
Yeah.
worst case.
Yeah. It's like it's cyclical. Um, Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until
I think it, or I'm aware that I'm thinking.
yeah, you're aware of thinking itself. That's very good. Can humans think with
There's actually a interesting piece. I mean, I'm a musician, I'm a singer and a podcaster, and there's a piece by Stockhausen, who's a very famous German composer, Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. and he has written a book. It's called, I think, 7 Days, where he has interesting practices to clear your mind. And I don't know, it's much more general than just a music piece. And there's one piece in it, I have done that, where the text is, or the order to the musicians, that you're only allowed to play a note when you're not thinking. And the thing is, we all then realized, how do you take this? Because there's always a preparation before you initiate whatever, a singing sound or a sound on your instrument. And so in a way, if you're really strict with it, you would not perform at all.
He outdid. What year is this? Is it pre John Cage 433 or post? It's probably post.
It's post, yeah.
Yeah. What's the name of the book? 7 Days?
I think it's called
DAYS?
7 days, 7 Tage. Now you learn new German words as well. 7 days, and the guy is called Karl-Heinz Stockhausen.
Is it 7 the number or 7 spelled out?
I mean, it is the number, but it's spelled out.
Okay, I'm going to look that up. I think that's one of the most important things. There's 3 people who I believe, I'm not into UFOs or that thinking. I know it could be, I don't study it heavily or believe it heavily, but I know it could be possible. But 3 people on Earth say they're from another planet, and I kind of believe them. Question Mark and the Mysterians, Garage Rock, Sun Ra, and Stockhausen. Do you believe Stockhausen's from another planet?
I don't know.
I asked you, can humans think without language? That was, yeah, okay. So language is not just words. This is Chomsky. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Well, you can get quiet, not say anything,
Yeah.
or try to describe it. And I mean, it's already fascinating because, well, I'm German, but I lived for a while in the United States, and I love the English language a lot. But it's always fascinating for me that there are words in different languages that don't exist in the other language because they don't perceive it in a certain way, or
Right.
they don't find it important. But for some countries, languages, this is important, and this is why they have a word for it. And this is also fascinating about words.
That's amazing because the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can. That's one of McLuhan's favorite lines, but there's someone, it could have been David Moss, who taught me that the New Guinea people have no word for music.
Wow.
So it's just like, no, it's just we do. We don't say we're doing music. Music's everything. So it's interesting, but the Aborigines in Australia have no word for boredom. And does that mean they never get bored? No, they probably get bored, but it's just not in their language to describe it like we do. You know, it's very interesting. Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I think it depends on the person.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some people, they were so stuck in their head and they don't feel anything. I mean, a lot of people have problems with really feeling it. That's challenging because oftentimes we're also afraid of feelings, especially if they're so what you call negative feelings.
Yeah.
And once you're able to face them, it's also when you can face the more negative stuff, your range gets bigger. So also maybe your joy might increase. And so I think it can be very different.
Yeah, it's like we invented the words thinking and feeling, so we think we can separate them, but really they're so interconnected. But Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. And I'm like, good luck. How do you turn your brain off? But people who meditate say, okay, now think about not thinking. And that's back to the Stockhausen. How can you, I mean, I've interviewed so many musicians who go, don't think. And it's like, yeah, right. That sounds like a high aspiration, but you have this Rolodex in your mind of all this music information. How do you let go of that and not think? I mean, clearing your mind. It could possibly be. There's a bumper sticker on a car in my street and it says, don't believe everything you think. And I'm like, well, you could say, don't believe everything you feel.
I think there's a lot of truth in it.
Yeah. These are two questions from Alan Turing in the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
Actually, I don't think the soul is thinking. I think there's something, I mean, if you already talked about meditation and there's something behind. The question is if you want to get there or if you can get there.
Yeah. What do you mean by behind? You mean nonverbal, or you mean inner thoughts, inner consciousness? What does behind mean?
It's probably hard to describe, but
Yeah.
if I would use a word, I probably would use consciousness.
Yeah. Well, you're anticipating a question coming up soon, so you must have ESP. So this is Alan Turing's second question. Can machines think?
That would be funny. Well, I mean, we're on this earth, we're developing interesting things, AI, so we will maybe find out if those machines, those AIs will be able to think. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Happiness.
I got it from Viktor Frankl's books, Man's Search for Meaning. And he says happiness doesn't tend to last, meaning tends to last. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think with the meaning, you might be able that it lasts over your death and that other people will maybe think of you or read it or whatever, listen to our shows or our podcasts or something. But the question is what I'm here for. And I think I'm here for to be fulfilled and happy. And
Yeah.
that guides and draws other great things to me. Great people, great projects.
Yeah, I like that word, to be fulfilled. Really good. So here's the question you anticipated. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
That's a great question. I did not anticipate it. I think I would go for the first, for detect.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I don't know, because maybe I mean, there's this thing also with physics, when you put your awareness onto something, you might create something, or even, I mean, there are those experiments where you change the outcome. So I don't know, I guess that's the mystery of life.
Yeah. You mean like visualizing something, you manifest it. Or if you think about it, then you manifest it.
Yes, but there's also, and there those experiments where they whatever have something rolling down or some balls, and when no one is watching it, it's going a certain way, and as soon as a person is putting awareness on it, it already changes the pattern.
Oh, that's
I don't know what it is.
Heisenberg? Something like that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't remember those things, but I heard some physics stuff and
Yeah. I like that physics stuff. That's what I'm into, physics stuff.
well,
I'm
maybe
into
it's bad English.
no, it's not bad English because it's like the other way is we use this word, not ness, N-E-S-S, physicsness, or musicness. It's just
Okay.
it's sort of like in encompassing everything about that word, you know. No,
Oh,
stuff's a good word. Um, what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought? Talk about physics.
I would say the speed of thought.
Yeah, hello. There's no right or wrong answers, but that one you got right. Thank you.
Okay.
There's a poet, Audre Lorde. She said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Her colleague, Yvonne Rayner, said, "Oh, you can if you expose the tools." What new tool do you suggest?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know about the tools, but there is, I think, a similar saying by Albert Einstein that says you cannot solve a problem with whatever you have created it,
Yeah,
and that somehow reminds me of it. And um, I think I'm sometimes a person who also likes to invent things, and if I've done an experience already, I try to create something new and think of something new. But I guess I'm just a very curious person.
yeah. So you're saying the new tool would be curiosity. That's a
Certainly.
yeah. That's really
Okay,
good. That
then I take curiosity.
no, that's that Einstein quote is amazing. No one's ever compared it to Audre Lorde's quote, but it's very similar. But the counter to it all is Marcel Duchamp, who said, "There's no solutions because there's no problems." He just said, once you say, "Oh, this is a problem," you've created it. So why not even just why call it a problem? But Einstein is saying, "Hey, we invented this word. I can get a little deeper on how are we going to solve it or address it." Beautiful. So, what new toy do you suggest?
Actually, I have a big wish, and maybe someone listens to me and creates this for me. And the one thing I wish, because I'm traveling a lot as a singer, and I have to carry all my luggage, and that's not good. And I have to do things for my bag and so on. But why can someone, and this would be my toy or toy, uh, a cloud for luggage?
Yeah,
That I have my luggage in this cloud, and wherever I go and perform, I can pull out my things.
yeah.
Can someone invent this for me?
Oh, totally. But yeah, yeah, that's the future. Why would you even, the luggage is stupid. It's like horrible. Yeah, I totally agree with you. They invent so many new things with AI now. That seems a no-brainer. I invented years ago the concept of a self-cleaning kitchen.
Like that. Can I buy it
That's
from you,
simple.
or where is it?
Yeah, it's it. I mean, why hasn't anyone invented it? I invented the words, but then the other invention I had is a car that comes with a parking space.
Awesome.
Okay, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Hmm. I'm actually not such a worrying person. What do I worry about? I don't think I worry.
Oh, you cut out there for a second. Let's see if you come back. Okay, we're hanging in there. Hopefully, you'll come back. We either have server problems or computer tech ghost in the machine. I can't hear you. Your picture froze. Let's hope this jumps back in really soon. Okay, you might want to, yeah, go out and come back in. So we want to encourage you to check out Irene's website, and it will direct you to her podcast. which is extensive, interviewing people like David Moss, Joan LaBarbera, many important new music people. And it looks like she's back.
Yes, I am.
Good. So there's someone, a ghost in the machine, but I'm glad you're back. And yeah, if it happens again, that's the best way. Just go out and come back in.
They don't want us to create new things.
Yeah. They're like, no, your suggestion for having luggage in the cloud is beautiful. And thank you for that. And thanks for coming back. Marshall McLuhan learned from the poet Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So I ask you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us? And, you know, by artists, I mean poets, musicians, painters. They're all broadcasting these like deeper meanings. Why do people kind of ignore the deeper meanings?
Well, one thing is, I mean, I'm an artist myself, so for me it's very normal what you describe, and I'm probably a lot around with people. For them, it's normal too, and we acknowledge the advantages with and through art. And so it's hard for me to kind of imagine how the other people feel, but I assume that they're either afraid or they don't get it, because I
Yeah.
mean, at least here in Germany, we right now we have again talks about cutting fundings for festivals, cutting fundings for whatever music education, and I think it's very dumb.
Yeah, it's sad. The arts are going to enliven and enrich people and fulfill them to do important things and make the world a better place. Do
I
artists?
actually tell you another story because we were with Albert Einstein. There's a story I heard and I really love it that supposedly, I hope it's true, there was a time he wanted to find out what successful people have in common.
Yeah.
And he invited everyone he knew who were successful, whatever, in business or in medicine or in arts or all different areas to a dinner. And then he talked with them and he wanted to figure out if there is something in common. And he actually found something. And the something was all the people who were there played an instrument.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. Did he play an instrument?
Yeah, the violin.
Oh my God, that is really good. See, you know, that's Walter Pater saying all art aspires to the condition of music. Poetry, architecture, politics, everything wishes it can be as cool as music. Music's the ultimate art, you know, is the ultimate expression. Because you know why? Because you play music, you don't work it. But I
Wow.
know you're a disciplined musician. You've put a lot of time in learning your art. It's amazing. It's really fun. You get it. So did I ask you this? Do artists have a moral obligation?
Mm, I think it's also, I mean, up to the individual. I mean, some are very driven by it, and then that's good. I think you should do what is natural to you
Yeah.
and not, I don't know, try to propose something. But yes, we are usually public figures, so we are in some ways we are role models, whether we're really like very politic or just
Yeah.
whatever, showing ourselves as a hopefully decent human being or something. But we're always seen and always watched, and we can inspire people. Yes.
Yeah. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
This goes back to the quote by Joe Cage, I assume.
That's you you mean you have a quote you told me by John Cage or the one which one?
There is a famous quote by John Cage that says, "I'm more afraid of the old ideas than the new ideas."
Oh, you know that quote. That's it. I base this question on that. He said, "I can't understand why people are frightened of new ideas. I'm frightened of old ones." And then
Yeah.
Charles Kettering said it even better. People are very open-minded about new things as long as they're exactly like the old ones. But I
Well,
mean,
I'm
yeah,
as we mentioned before, I love curiosity. I'm a curious person, and I guess that's why I also ended up singing lots of contemporary music because
yeah,
it inspires me with curiosity, and I don't get bored. And so I love new ideas. I like
yeah,
inventing, and but I also know that in our whatever brain and how we are as human beings, that we have a part in us that likes to have adventure and new things, and we also have a part in us that wants to feel safe and comfortable. And I think we're always in this struggle,
yeah.
and then it depends maybe on which side you stand more, and so that's then also very individual. And probably in the end we need both for maybe surviving as a society, the people who look for what should stay stable and solid, and maybe things where we should move on.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to make it clear. I'm for anecdotes, stories, going off on tangents. You don't have to answer the question, but you have done really good. You're concise and articulate. And in that regard, I'm curious, at what point were you raised speaking German and then they told you, oh, you have to also learn English? Or were you raised speaking both? How many languages do you know? Because you speak English very well. And I know you studied in America a little, but just your history of speaking English.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Germany, and but my parents, we mentioned already our last names, they escaped from Czechoslovakia. So I also grew up with Czech, but unfortunately, when I got into kindergarten, I didn't want to speak Czech anymore. So
Well, that happened again. I wonder why. So we'll hopefully she'll reboot in here. And we'll be patient and enjoy the silence and the noise in my garden as we wait for her to return. Again, I suggest you visit her website and learn of her various music. Oh,
I'm back
good.
with me. I don't know what's happening today. I never
Oh,
had.
yeah, that's just a ghost
Sorry,
in the
I'm
machine.
sorry, I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's not your fault, I'm sure. It's basically the servers or whatever, but you might uh, cancel out your other one. You got two up, just so we don't get any feedback.
Okay, is it fine now?
It's all right, but it's not. There's no feedback yet, but we can just keep going. No,
Okay.
but here's the line. Here's the line that we left off of. You're raised Czech. You're speaking Czech at home, and I've got to tell you one Czechoslovakian joke. Miroslav Vitus, the first bass player for Weather Report, the jazz group, he says they call me Bounce because I'm one bad Czech.
Oh no.
Okay,
Okay.
so you're raised Czech, and then in kindergarten you says, "I don't want to be speaking Czech." Then what happened?
Yeah, that was funny because sometimes my father would tell me something in Czech or say, please tell your mother da 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 dum. And I would go to my mother and say it in German, and she would answer in Czech, and I would deliver the answer back in German to my
Oh my
daddy.
God! What age is that?
I don't know, 4 or 3 or something. I was fairly small, but I found it very interesting. I could not go to Czechoslovakia because my parents have escaped, and I could only go there when the wall came down. And when I went there, I think I was 16 or 17, and we visited relatives. And I was amazed that in the first night, I dreamed in Czech. And I have the feeling this language is very deep and emotional in me. So it could be worthwhile to do something with it. With English, it's funny too. I had Latin and English at school. I was very good in Latin and I was not very good in English. So I even dropped English.
What age
And then
what age are you dropping English?
before we did the Abitur, the final degree of our high school, you could decide on languages. And since I had bad grades in English, I dropped it. And then I continued with Latin. And suddenly this opportunity race with this teacher from Dallas, Texas, who I met, and she wanted to bring me over to study there. And suddenly I had to do English and all kind of tests, and I took private lessons, and I barely passed it. And when I came then to the United States, when you study, you have an advisor, and we also had to do some reading tests, and I don't know. And she looked at me and she's like, I don't think you're never gonna make it. Your English is too bad. And then she wanted me to take a class, and I said, like, I don't have the money for this class. I want to try. And then I tried, and after a few months, my English was there. And then they even asked me if I would train or help other international students. And I think for
Oh,
me, it was the best to just be thrown into it. And in Dallas, Texas, I had no chance to speak any German, which was challenging, but it was the best thing because then I learned it. And I'm happy because it's a great language to communicate because everyone speaks it. And I also love this language because it has such a huge vocabulary. And as I mentioned before, I think with every language you speak, you maybe address certain parts in yourself. I feel different speaking English than speaking German, and I like me speaking English.
and dress different parts of your body or yourself. That's
I don't know, it's
amazing.
just how I feel. It's just
No, I
I
mean
get a
that
different
that's
flow when I speak English
oh,
compared to
that's
German.
but you do it so well, and that's funny that you went through all that. I think you learned it by teaching it. But were these other students you were teaching English?
No, I didn't take it on. They asked me, but I didn't do it.
Oh, you didn't do it. But then how'd
No.
you learn English? By watching movies or TV or just by talking?
No, I just had to do it. I mean, I arrived there and I was already studying. So I had to write papers, I had to do exams and all that. And I just was doing it somehow.
But the majority of your podcasts are in German or various?
It has changed. I started out in German in 2018. And then I sometimes broadcasted in English whenever I felt like it or I had interesting people. And then last year, I started to do one episode in English a year. And that has changed the game because now it's really worldwide. And so I'm continuing with English as well.
Good. Really good. What a history. Beautiful, interesting history. So basically, you speak German, Czech, and English. Those three?
I speak a little bit of Italian, but it's also kind of rusty right now because
Yeah,
when you study singing, especially in the United States or Canada, I also was in Vancouver for my master's.
right.
That's a very good thing compared to Germany. In Germany, you only have to learn Italian as a language, and it's a very I didn't learn a lot when I was in Munich. But when you do this in a degree where I've done it in the United States or in Canada, you really learn it as a language and quite thoroughly. And and my Italian was pretty good at some point. My French was never that good, but you never know
Yeah,
where life will lead me. Yeah.
beautiful. So, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
My earliest memory on anything.
Any early memory, you like the earliest memory or one of the earliest? memories?
I think things I really remember are where I whatever was playing with other girls in the kindergarten. And I think that's probably a memory where I have the feeling it's my memory. But there are also memories where I'm not sure if I remember it or I just think of it because my parents told me
Yeah.
that were earlier. And yeah, so I think I would distinguish between those.
Oh, yeah. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I mean, you can always learn something from your memory or make decisions, but I also like or more and more like being in the void and making decisions from there.
Yeah. Being in the void. Wow, we've got to get into that. But um, tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact?
Um, both of my parents actually are very good also at mathematics and science, and I was always very good at that, which sometimes seems unusual because sometimes there are weird stories like, oh, girls are not good at math. At
Yeah,
least we have those stories in Germany. And for me, this was always very easy. And I always say that my sister, I have a younger sister, and me, we kind of got the same talents. She was very musical, has a very nice voice, and she also was good at math and physics, and as me. But I then decided to go the music path, and my sister became a teacher for mathematics and physics. But I think in that way we inherited something and we were both good at numbers. And that's sometimes handy, even being an artist.
really good. Well, Thelonious Monk says music is math. But before we get into music, a few more philosophical questions. Let's just go back to that for a second, though. Do you think you got this talent in math and science more from the DNA of your parents or more from the way they raised you? I know it's both, and it's really hard to say one or the other. Of course, you can't. But your hunch, is it a little more the DNA or a little more is it a little more nature or a little more nurture?
I think it's a DNA thing, but I
Little
think
more.
because
Yeah.
because it was for them also very easy or natural, I think that's why they could also pass it on to us. And for them, it was just
Yeah.
normal that we would be good at those things.
Yeah. Now, the same question outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you, and what was that impact?
Actually, there have been many great people who had an impact on me. Now I have to pick one. Um, One person who also had a big impact on me was my former father-in-law. And there were two things that were very remarkable. One thing was when I got to know him more, I was just finishing with my studies and I started to whatever my freelance career. And for some reason, I thought to show everyone that I'm successful, I have to talk about how busy I am and how stressful everything is, and I'm doing so good. And I mentioned this to him, and he said to me, I give you know one advice. And he's a very actually kind of a known brain scientist. And he said to me, and he's successful and had everything in life. And he said to me, Irene, cross this word out, cross out stress. I have the observation if people talk about stress, they always are stressed. You can be busy, you can have a lot on your plate, but cross this word out. And I did. and I never experienced stress in a way. And I always was fascinated when people would talk about it, and I had the feeling they would drag it like a tail, even more stress, stress, stress. And I'm like, cross it out. And
That
the other
is-
thing, what I found very remarkable, he would write like a diary, and he sometimes would also give it to his children or me, and we could read it. And there was actually not much written in it. And most of the time, there were very simple sentences like, I had a great lunch with my wife. And at first, I thought, like, this is boring. I'm sure he has many more interesting things to tell. And it took me years to realize that he was just so thankful. And that was also a learning from him for me.
oh my God, what an amazing. What's his first name?
I don't want to say.
Oh, okay. So, anyways, that was amazing. I really needed both of those. So, thank him if he's still alive that he passed some wise advice through you to me. So, let's just go on those for a second. Are your parents stress? Did they had stress in their life, or in he was unusual? Do most of the people you know have a little stress and talk about it, or it was he an exception to his peer group, his family and friends, saying cross that word out?
Well, for me, it was amazing that I did it. And I actually have hardly people around me who talk about stress. And whatever the few I had, I don't have anymore in my life. Let's put it that way. And I also thought about this later on with my parents. And I must say, my parents always have been very hardworking, but they also never complained. They
Yeah,
never said this is too much or so. They just did it. So I never grew up that something
yeah.
is stressful. But as I said, for some reason, I thought if I give this impression, I tell everybody how successful I am, and that's stupid. No.
That's great. It's stupid. No, stress. What he taught you is completely, in my opinion, what William Blake said. We become what we behold. So if you're stressed out, you're gonna, it's gonna get to you, And then writing the simple, it's probably because he's a brain scientist. Then his diary says, I had a great lunch. And you go, that's boring. It's like, no, that's his way was to get it out with a pen in a little diary, because they say journaling is so important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Really good. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No. They were very off religion in a way, and I found them my own religion.
Do you pray?
Yes, in some way you would say, yeah.
Yeah.
Or I connect with whatever I believe in. Yeah.
If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Well, as I mentioned before, I want to live a fulfilled life, and then maybe he would ask me, were you happy and did you like all the gifts and opportunities I sent to you?
Yeah, that's good. You want him to ask you a question. That is good. Most people go, oh, you did a good job. I was like, all right, I get that so much. And they want him to say, well, welcome, and you did a good job. Okay, that was very unique. I appreciate you saying that.
I don't think we're here to do I mean, in God's perspective, I don't
Well,
think we're here to
I'm
do a
just
good
saying
job.
that
He
most,
give us the free will. We can do anything we
yeah, but
choose.
I'm saying it's interesting. All my questions, I get patterns of
Ah,
how a lot of people answer them. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong or anything. It's just an observation that people a lot of want them to say, And then I get great answers. Somebody says, I don't want God to say anything to me. You know, And so
I would
that
also just cuddle with him, maybe.
cuddle with them. That is even better. Cuddle with him. Yeah, and again, we're saying him, cuddle with God. We don't know if it's a him or her.
I know, we don't know.
But we don't even know if it exists. That's the other thing. Um, you know, the next question is, do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Hmm. Hmm. Probably the later, that evil uses the people, but then they appear evil.
Yeah. Again, I want to thank you. There's no rush, and taking time to think is fine. The real hidden question, though, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I would wonder about what acknowledging means. If I'm just aware of whatever there is, or this whatever enemy or mean person, um, it might also already help me to maybe react a different way or go away. Or sometimes people feel when you see through them and they might already act differently and you haven't said a word. Um, so if I would take acknowledge really as the pure meaning, but if I would take acknowledge that I think constantly about this person and how mean he is and blah 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 blah, then I make it stronger. And then this person is even hunting me when I'm maybe not even around with this person because I keep continuing the story. And maybe then I make it bigger and whatever, more horrendous. And so I would kind of distinguish.
Yeah, no, it's really good because it's sort of this whole exercise and conversation is how we psychoanalyze all the words I start the questions with. And it, like, acknowledge is often challenged. Like, what do you mean by acknowledge? Because if you don't acknowledge them, you empower them. But like, if your friend comes to you and says, someone's bullying me, what would you say to do? What would advice would you give them?
Oh, I think it always depends on the bullying as well. I mean, um, if it's something you're just whatever, walk away, or if it's a situation you really need to take care of, or maybe have a talk, or try to find a solution if whatever you have to work with this person every day or something like that. Um, yeah, it's a
Well,
tough one.
that's good because it's continued with this. Nassim Taleb said games were created to give non heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. My friend says, well, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. Gregory Bateson said, if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff? Or does he go, whoa, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts. The basic question is, does punishment work?
Wow, that's a tough one too. I mean, there are also people who then if they have not realized that they have done something wrong, they might realize it. But maybe some people just don't care.
Yeah.
And then maybe they don't care about punishment either. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I knew a guy who spent most of his life in jail. I says, what was it? HBO, drug of your choice, and cell phones? And he goes, yeah, you know. But I mean, we know that jails are not efficient, but if someone's doing harm to others, is that the way? Can you, the next question would be, can you really reform people by doing something like putting them in a jail or whatever, rehabilitate people? How do you do that? Is that workable? Again, to Einstein, is that a workable solution to the problem? You know,
Yeah, we don't know. And I mean, maybe also putting some people away, it's not only whatever if it would does something to them, but maybe protect the other ones that are whatever still outside of jail. But I mean, this is always the question, what do you do with this situation? Because I
yeah,
mean, there are people, whatever, who grew up very, I don't know, poor and in very terrible circumstances, and some never get out, and some get
yeah,
out and do something great. And
yeah,
I don't know why some people choose this and that.
yeah. No, it's a tough conundrum. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, William Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
It's a very interesting question. Um, yeah, it goes both ways, that I mean, sometimes you experience things in life that you think they're so crazy, and if you would put them on a movie screen, nobody would believe you. And you also have them the other way around, that whatever you see something on the movie theater and you're whatever amazed, or you like it to be drawn into feelings or a different world or a different perspective. And I also enjoy being on stage, that I can get into so many expressions and feelings, and also live certain things maybe on stage I would not do in in my life. And yeah, it's very interesting. And I mean, there's also this thing about the brain, that they say that you cannot in the end know the difference if you watch a movie or if you're whatever the real life.
No, it's really, it's again, you're raising good questions. That's what this series is about, is not so much answering questions, but inventing new questions and new metaphors. Because like, we don't know if violent films causes people to be violent or alleviates them of the need to be violent. I think we're more hardwired to be cooperative, and so very good. So walk us through, you're raised by parents in math and science. What are you listening to in high school and college, or in pre-high school? And where's that tipping point where you go, oh, I want to be a singer, and then I want to be a singer of new music? Where's those tipping points? Oh boy, we froze up again, but we'll hopefully come back and continue this lively, rich discussion. Again, I really recommend going to her website listed below and watch and listen to her sing and listen to her podcast. Very interesting what we've talked about so far. And I look forward for the moment when the little box reappears and I hit enter the studio again. We're back. So yeah, where's those tipping points where you decided my calling is music and singing?
Yeah, it actually came very early. I always liked singing, and I already sang in kindergarten, and they always liked it. And whenever there were little plays they did in kindergarten or in early high school, elementary school, I was the one up front. I wanted to be on stage, and I really loved being on stage. Um, then I got into a very good choir that was good, and through that choir, I also got to do children roles at the Opera House in Nuremberg, which also was already something where like, okay, I really like this. And when you ask me about what I listened to, um, back in those times, we had tapes. I'm sure you still know tapes. And we had tapes by Deutsche Grammophon, and they were like whatever, a Mozart symphony or some arias from whatever, Don Giovanni, Mozart, and so on. And for some reason, my parents gave me those tapes, and I was listening to them. And my cat was listening through them too. We will listen to it together. And I really liked the Don Giovanni when I got that. And then I was singing all those arias in whatever our house with, I don't know, being 10 or so. And then I saw that Don Giovanni would be broadcast on TV. And I usually had to be in bed. My parents were strict with that at 8, and it was at 8:15 at night. And I wanted to see Don Giovanni, like a 3-hour opera. And my parents thought this was extraordinary. And then they sat me in front of a very small black and white TV. And they thought, well, let her watch this. She's gonna fall asleep. So they came in whatever every 30 minutes. And I was awake until the end of the opera. And but when I was like whatever in my high school and puberty, I also listened to whatever rock and pop or certain German groups we had who were quite kind of wild, but probably people in the US don't know it. But we also, I mean, I remember this, I think also made it to the US, 99 Luftballons by Nena, 99 balloons.
Oh yeah, I love that song. I was wondering how about Can, Can? You know that rock band Can? They were
Yeah.
experimental. How about Nina Hagen?
I knew her somewhat, but I think when I was younger, I did not understand her yet. I got more interested in her when I was later because she was also doing really interesting and crazy things with her voice. And I do
Oh,
sometimes crazy things with my voice, doing whatever the contemporary music. And so I went to a music high school, and then I went to study. And as you said before, Munich, Dallas, Vancouver. And then, yeah, I
but are
started
you
as a freelancing singer.
right? But I mean, just name a couple other popular singers aside from art music and classical music, orchestral music. Con- then before we get into contemporary, more like pop, jazz, or rock, or pop. Anybody else besides 99 Balloons that you
That you
heard?
might know. Let me think. I listened to Midnight Oil.
Right. Okay.
What's the other one? REM I listened to also.
Right.
I mean, the
Right.
Germans ones you probably don't know, Die Ärzte, Tote Hosen, and such things, but they're probably too German.
Yeah.
And I also had a phase where I listened actually to The Clash. Should I stay or should I go?
No, that's good. So then where are you hearing new music, what you call new music, contemporary, the Stockhausen, John Cage world? Where does that come in, and where's you go, oh, that's my direction? Why didn't you stay with the opera? I mean, was opera your kind of jumping off point?
Um, Actually, I was at a music high school, and they were very, very elaborate, and we had some, yeah, very interesting teachers, and they actually showed us Stockhausen and John Cage and Berio. And I also remember I listened to Berio Sequenza when I was, I think, 14, and I was fascinated and scared at the same time because I'm like, this is really crazy with Kathy Barbarian, and I thought like, oh my God, she's hurting her voice. And there was this tiny little voice in the back of my head that said, you will sing this piece one day, which I did. And but at first I thought I will be, as you mentioned, a classical opera singer. So this is what I went to study. But I always was open for other things. And it was also funny when I was then in Dallas, Southern Methodist University. We had a degree for composers, a master's degree, and they were looking for singers who would sing their stuff. And even though I would say it was not that crazy, like some stuff I sang later on, and I was the only one who was willing to sing it. None of my colleagues wanted to sing this music. And then in the end, it actually ended up that other colleges in Texas, and you know, Texas is big, they even asked me to sing that music. And it was always like, oh, there's this crazy German, she's going to sing this music. So it always came, it knocked on my door. And when I then had my degree and I went back to Germany to build my career, I always was involved in contemporary music, and somehow it just continued. I was kind of thrown into it, and yeah, so
That's
it
good.
took me a different direction, but I
No,
like it. And as more as I noticed that I'm so curious, because I think I also had this point. I mean, I love Mozart and Handel, and I also like singing this stuff. But I think I could not imagine to sing this stuff the whole year throughout.
yeah.
And with contemporary music, it challenges me more, and so I feel very happy with that.
No, you really articulate and concise. You communicated that well to me. I appreciate it. There's music people. I'm just curious, just an aside. Have you ever heard Diamanda Galas?
Hmm.
Because
She's also
she,
amazing. She does
yeah,
crazy, cool things with her voice. Yes,
yeah.
certainly.
And then do you know Pauline Oliveros?
Yes, I met her.
Yes, good.
She's amazing too, in a very different way, because she also had this thing of deep listening, where you
Yeah,
really listen and you're aware. And she was doing a workshop and a concert in Cologne, and I was part of that. And it was an experience in my life, yes.
very good. So, do you compose music and lyrics, or do you just sing, do other people's compositions?
Well, basically, I'm singing the compositions of other people, but I do I improvise, and I often realize now more that it's composing and instant composing, because I think I'm good at it, or getting
Yeah,
even better, that I kind of listen what's going on, and then I often make also very conscious choices what I want to add to it, and then I also give it a turn or a direction. Um, but I'm also good at creating projects that I have ideas, and then I find the right people. So in that way, I am creative, even though I'm not composing the music, and I
yeah,
leave it to the composer. But yeah, I often have ideas, and then we get together. And with lyrics, that's also interesting, because I have written poems and short stories when I was like 16 or so. And sometimes I find them, and I sometimes wonder if I should you
Yeah.
know, put them in a document and maybe see if somebody wants to do something with it, because I even think it's not that bad what I've written back then.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. But actually, earlier in our discussion, you said I'm an artist. Do you also paint? Did you mean that? You're an artist, or you mean you're an artist as a musician?
Yeah, I'm an artist as a musician, but I mean, no, I don't paint. I mean, I have been painting in school because
Yeah,
it was like an art music school, and
yeah,
so we were already, but I wouldn't say that's like, yeah, I'm not going after it. But the
yeah.
writing thing always showed up, and then as we mentioned, I started the podcast, and during the pandemic, I did 3 books out of the podcast, and
Right. You've done books too. Yeah,
so
writing.
now I can call myself an author, and I also write sometimes for magazines. And
And
but those
those
things
just
are interesting because they just came, they developed. I mean, with
yeah,
singing, it was really like, I want to sing, and I was going after it. But I'm sometimes amazed how things just, in a way, happen on the side. And I'm like, wow, I have now 3 books, and then I'm in this book of the composer, and in this magazine. I'm like, how have I done it?
good. Now, those books are fiction or nonfiction?
Well, the books right now, they're the ones. There are certain episodes for my podcast that were transcribed and put in a nice version,
So
and
you're saying that's nonfiction, basically.
it's nonfiction, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
when I was my early stuff, my real early stuff from age 16,
Yeah.
that's nonfiction.
Yeah.
And it's funny how things appear then in life, because back then I was thinking about writing a book, but I thought I would write a crime story when I'm like 80.
Yeah.
And now I've written books, but I'm not 80, and I don't know if I would write a crime story.
Yeah. Back to the word improv. I'm curious if you've listened to people like Ella Fitzgerald, Flora Purim, the jazz singers.
Actually, not that much.
Okay.
Even though I think, I mean, you can learn from anyone.
Yeah.
But I'm also a big fan of the guy you already mentioned, and he has been on your show as well, David Moss. I think he's an
Oh,
amazing improviser, and
yeah.
I totally adore his work and what he does with his voice. And I was so happy when we got to work together. And also, when you improvise with him, in a way, he's also very clear, and somehow it's almost like he sends you in a telepathic way. Um,
Telepathic way.
that
Exactly.
that
Really.
that I have the feeling I did what he wanted me to do, but he didn't say
He didn't tell you, it just happened naturally.
it happened. But he has a way that he somehow is so connected with you, that's unbelievable.
Yeah. And it's funny because I know him through the jazz improv world more and mainly through Frank Zappa. Have you ever listened to Frank Zappa at all?
Not that much, but I certainly
Yeah.
know who he is. I mean, he's also a hero, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now here's the question. A screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process? Not when you're like writing a commission piece, more like, you know what I mean, just in the general creativeness of your being, what role does intention play?
Well, I think for me, I'm very clear with my intention, what I want or what I'm after, but the audience or the observer or listener or whatever can make their own. I would never tell anyone what to think about it, or suggest things. But for me, for myself, I'm usually quite clear what I want.
Yeah, because yeah, you anticipated the next question is Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of the listener when you're singing?
Well, while I'm already on stage, I mean, when I sing at home, I don't think very much of the listener. I just sing. Actually goes maybe back to what you asked me very early on. I would not say that I think about them. It's maybe more either a feeling or an awareness
Yeah.
that I feel someone is in the room, and I feel rooms and people very well, or I can, I don't know, connect in a certain way with them. And yeah, but it's, I don't know if it's like on a conscious, subconscious level, because thinking is too much. I don't think about them. In a way, I'm in my world, but I'm not in my world. But somehow I'm connected. I'm not connected. It's hard to tell.
Well, no, I'm gonna jump to this next question because we're gonna go into music now. But it's Ruth Draper, performance artist, said the key is to bring the audience up onto the stage and into the scene with you. It is they who must give you even more than you give them in the way of imagination and creative power. Now that sounds good, but how do you do that? How do you're performing in front of an audience, how do you bring them in?
I'm not even sure if we can really grab it, because maybe if we could, I don't know, anyone could do it. Um, I think you're there with whatever you're doing. You have a presence
Yeah.
that draws in. And well, one thing I have been observing too in the last years, which I find interesting, that there oftentimes two types of artists. I mean, some people can also do both, or depending on whatever the piece or the subject. But there are people who are on stage and they do more this is now almost like marketing, the push energy, that they really are outgoing and communicate with their audience. And then there are the people who are pull, like for me, like Nick Cave is pull. He's on stage and it looks like he doesn't care about the audience and he draws them in. He's like a magnet.
Yeah.
And so I observe that more and more, that some artists are either way and some can also play with both.
Yeah. Push and pull, really good. That's like jujitsu. You know, the word jujitsu is sort of what you just described. Etymologically, it breaks down art and science, soft and gently. It's like, what? It's like that push and pull of art and science. And we're going to get into that later if we have time, the difference between art and science. But what's the function of, no, I had another question before that one. McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness, like knife and fork extends our teeth. The shutter in a camera extends our eyelid. Maybe even non-tangible, say religion or philosophy, extends consciousness. What does the note? Because I mean, basically, or the score, I would say maybe the score, the written notes on a page is invented by humans. Scoring. Uh, what does that extend? What humanness does the score extend? Because I mean, basically, that's your main tool. Your tool is your voice interpreting what Captain Beefheart said so well. It's just ants crawling on white paper, black dots on a piece of paper, white paper. What do notes extend for you, or the score? What humanness?
Oh, mm, I mean, at first it tries to bring on paper whatever the composer has perceived.
Yeah.
and he tries his best, because we also know that there is limitation in notation, and some things you cannot even notate.
Yeah.
And then I get this, and I mean, there's certain things that are obvious, and I can whatever practice the right pitches, the rhythm, and so on. But there's always something underlying, and sometimes you can feel it very nicely, and sometimes you have to figure it out, or sometimes as longer as you work with the piece, you find an inner logic in it.
Yeah.
And I
Logic.
also find it fascinating when then, I mean, with contemporary music, I usually work with composers who are still alive so I can meet them. And when we get together for the first rehearsal, and just that the composer is with me or with the ensemble and me in the room already changes something, even though he might have not said one word yet. And then I also observe things which I also found fascinating. I had this 2 times in my life that I got a score, and there was one section I struggled with in getting it, I don't know, into my body somehow. And I would always wanted to sing something else than that was written there. And then I talked to the composers and I was honest. And they even said to me, I was not sure about this spot. I was always going back and forth. So it's weird that I could feel those spots that somehow I had a hard time to learn them, and everything else was fine. So I think the musicians can read a lot more out of the score than sometimes people or even composers think.
Really good. Couple things. That's like, do you know Conlon and Caro?
Mm-mm.
Oh my God, you've got to check him. He only composed on, he's new music pioneer. He only composed on piano rolls. So basically, he was punching holes in white paper, and it played on a piano. So there's no human. And Trimkin is this guy who just studied his music so deeply, and he's saying there's one piano roll, and you can't tell if it's this note or that note by the way the hole is in the piano roll. And Colin says, "Quit hassling me. I don't know." He didn't want to make a decision. So that's similar. Now back to Frank Zappa. He starts his movie Baby Snakes, and they're playing an improvised piece, but it's written somewhat. And that one of the players says, "What about this?" And he goes, "Just randomize it." And he literally gives the instruction, just be random there. So
Yeah.
that's the opposite of saying this is what notes is. He learned it from going to church, and as a teenager, and when the choir sang, the candles would move, the flame would move because the air was pushing the candles. And he noticed the choir was affecting the way the candles moved. So he called music air molecule sculptures.
Wow.
So, that's what we're doing. We're dealing with these air molecules in arranging them. But I'm
What
glad
is
you, yeah, I'm
what is
glad.
also fascinating for me, when we talk about, because you talked about the score, that whatever lets music be alive and through musicians or however. And one thing that always fascinates me is the difference when a country has a oral tradition, like
Yeah,
whatever Indian music and so on, and they whatever sing their trubat and raga since, I don't know, 1,000 years, and it's probably pretty authentic.
yeah,
And that's the advantage of not notating it, because you
yeah,
pass it on. And in Europe, we had the opposite, because we have then the printing, and then first the Catholic Church started to print their whatever Gregorian chant and so on. But with this, you could fix it and put it on paper, and then we had then whatever we could call the first artificial, that we have more than just unison. And then we had those periods like Baroque music and the Renaissance and the classical and the romantic. And I think it all has to do with that we put it down on paper. And in a way, it's cool to have this development, but we don't know. I mean, I've also sing medieval music. In the end, we don't know how they have sung it because we don't have the oral tradition like the Indian music have.
Yeah.
And this is also fascinating for me.
Totally amazing. What you really captured what Marshall McLuhan most probed is the difference between spoken word and printed word. In passing on. There's a woman who was on the radio once, and she was a famous writer, and she came from the Caribbeans, and her mother never read a book, but her mother knew what to do when a tsunami hit by a song that she sang. So it wasn't like, oh, what do you do when there's a flood? You look at it and they tell you in the paper or a book. No, she knew it from a song.
Wow.
And so that's like, there's one more. Charlie Hayden plays bass in jazz with Ornette Coleman and many people. Famous jazz bass player. And in the middle of a jazz song, he plays an old Appalachian folk song called Old Joe Clark. And I didn't know what the name of that song was. I should have, but it's like an old traditional song. And I asked him, I says, who wrote that? And he goes, nobody wrote it. Now, which is funny because somebody wrote it, but it was before they were writing it on paper. They just passed the song on, and then eventually somebody claims the publishing by saying they arranged it. So then people think, well, you wrote it. No. The other Brazilian song that's like that is called Waters of March. Have you ever heard that song? Look it up. Mm-hmm. Waters of March. It's amazing. And it just passed on. Oh, no. So what is the function of music?
I think there's a lot to make people feel, to make people feel happy, to maybe even feel a connection, to be touched, to be entertained, to be taken out of the world I'm in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because, like Mickey Hart, the drummer of the Grateful Dead, said music was invented to warn people. They're coming to get our food, so they'd hit logs. And another friend of mine, a deep musicologist, says it's to dance. That music, the function is to dance. And it's endless. We don't know what the function of music is, and that's sort of the beauty of it. But all the words that you notated there were really well put, because this is Aaron Copland, and he says the 4 elements or ingredients of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. So first of all, in non-academic terms, what is tone color? So you're talking to a normal person on the street. How would you describe what is tone color?
I think the word is already perfect. The color of the tone.
That is a touche. Duh, the color of the tone. But color implies a visual. So how would you, now tone I understand, but because that's sound, because we're talking about music. But how would you what word would you substitute for color?
It's different tones and different shades, but that's again coloring. Different
Shapes,
qualities, different, yeah,
different
different
qualities and
qualities.
yeah, qualities and shape are because a shape can be uh, not so much visual. Okay, now how do you integrate, focus, maneuver those four elements in your musical output as a singer? What what is important to you? What is more important? Any sort of distinguishing between those four elements: melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color.
Wow, challenging. I think it also depends on the piece because I
Yeah,
mean, if it's a very rhythmic piece, then maybe I might focus on that more if I think that's the most important layer. And if it's whatever more melancholic piece or something where I feel it's more about, yeah, the wideness of it or something. Or if it is about coloring, then I bring in that. So I think it would depend on the piece. And when I study a piece for a performance, I usually go through all the layers, but then in the end, I don't think about it.
right. You don't think about it, right? But you still have a history of knowing what is melody, what is harmony. Someone told me recently that melody is it comes out of rhythm or something. It was like mind blowing what he I don't know because I'm not that well versed, but a friend of mine says the three T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. Technique, you've learned how to sing. Theory, you know the structure. How does one acquire taste?
Well, I guess that's in the end the one that makes an artist so individual because it's hopefully then just you, whatever your authentic self or whatever you see in this piece or you want to interpret. And even if whatever you look at a Mozart opera for whatever the 300th time, um, I don't know, a Susanna or a countess, and each singer will sing it differently. And that I think that's also the charm of it. But
But how do you
I find it
acquire?
hard. How do I find my taste? I mean, it's just how I whatever developed, and it's maybe my taste, and maybe some people will like it and some not.
Yeah,
And also when I listen to people, I might have the feeling, oh yeah, this is cool, and maybe there are things I'm like, oh no, it's not my cup of tea.
yeah. No, it's very interesting because the word taste implies gut. Someone says, oh, your stomach is part of your thinking, your gut affects your thinking. But some people, like, would veer towards opera. Some people go towards jazz. How do they do that? And usually people say, well, exposure or experience. But if it's not necessarily that. It could be a lot of that because if all you listen to is pop music in America, if they put on opera, you've never had a chance to develop an aesthetic because your parents had those cassettes. If they had cassettes of, you know, Patsy Cline singing country western songs, you might have gone to Texas and become a country western star.
But actually, my parents listened to country music as well. I
They
mean,
listen.
I got those classical music tapes,
No,
but they
you
also
mean
listened to Dire Straits and country music.
oh, they listen to contra music.
Yeah, with some German country music, which no one knows
Yeah,
here too. And I think I also liked it as a child because of the German language. I could sing with it. It was very easy to follow. Not that I thought it was the greatest, but it was easy to follow. But I think with all this, how you listen to music, and especially when you do contemporary music, and there are some people who don't like it or don't want to get into it, and blah blah blah. And then there were times where I was often when I would invite people or out of my whatever circle of friends, and then I thought I have to feel what they might like and invite them to the right concert.
yeah,
And And then I realized that sometimes I was totally wrong, that people really loved contemporary music where I never thought they would. And then at some point I stopped doing it. So I'm like, come to any concert, enjoy it or not, it's up to you. I often tell people with contemporary music, it's nice to sit up front because
Yeah.
oftentimes there's great things to see. People crawl into the piano or something. It's fun. Just watch it.
It's the subtleties, the nuances. You really want to be present. Okay, but here's the follow-up McLuhan quote about taste in music. I'm curious your reaction. He said, "Song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference." Any comment?
I could imagine because every language, as we mentioned before, has their own emotions, their own melody, and certainly it has an impact on whatever music they sing or compose. And the other thing we also talk sometimes when you also teach singing that people say singing is just a more whatever elaborate speech. So there is
Yeah.
a connection.
Yeah. It is how people speak in other countries. The tuba throat singers, are they reflecting how they sing and how they talk? And the language does affect. And that's why it's hard for people to understand when he says song is slowed down speech. So it's sort of metaphorically meaning slowed down. It's a form. Like what's more fundamental, language or music?
I think music.
Yeah. So I asked for 90 minutes. It's already 90 minutes. And I was wondering if we could do a part 2 down the road because we can really get deeper into music. And it's been so fun talking to you. It's really enlightening. Thank you so much.
So I don't know what you mean. We set up another date or we
Yeah.
continue now?
Yeah.
What's the plan?
No, let's
Okay.
let's set up another date where we can do a whole nother 90 minutes and
Oh, okay.
get deeper into music, It'd really be
Okay.
fun. Yeah.
Sure, we can do that.
So thank you so much. I'm going to hit the end broadcast button. I hope this never ends. We keep talking forever and ever. Really fun and delightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.